My heart is grieved, and I have finally been able to figure out what's going on. Now, as I sit down to share my thoughts and share my feelings, I have a list of scriptures before me. When I came to know God, it was an incredible moment of realizing that I'm not abandoned, I'm not forsaken, I'm not alone, I'm not an accident that was just placed into the care of hands that weren't very good at caring. Instead, I became a daughter, a child. I became called. When I became a believer, it was the book of Revelation that had opened my eyes and ears and heart to understanding the identity of Christ. After that, I spent the next 2 years or so reading the Old Testament. I really connected with the Old Testament so much more than the New Testament, and one of the reasons was God's pain. An opinion that I had always heard from others, which I decided to believe as well, is that God is just an angry God. Well, as I poured into these scriptures and I read it with new eyes and new ears, I understood that God is hurt. God was in pain. God was heartbroken. He felt betrayed. We see this part of God that is so incredibly human in the Old Testament because I respond to pain with anger. And as I read the Old Testament and I connected with God and his pain and his anger, and I understood finally that all of the anger that I was harboring inside of myself was killing me. Now, I had been angry for a very long period in my life, and that anger felt very justified. However, as I have read scriptures and as I have grown and matured, I have learned that the scriptures say that the sin of the father will visit to the 3rd and the 4th generation. I had heard stories about my great-grandfather's severe anger, and it had been reinforced to me by my family that that anger was a family trait. Once I had deeper understanding and wisdom because of the grace of God, I understood that I wanted to pray that anger away. And I spent months doing that, and I believed that God would answer that prayer, and that belief ignited in me actions that moved toward the outcome of that prayer, which would be healed anger, and therefore anger no longer dwelling within me. And so I practiced wellness. I went to the gym and I poured that anger out. I journaled and I talked about where it was coming from. I meditated and I opened up myself to the Lord and said, help me find the places it's hiding. I took my thoughts captive and I explored where they were coming from, and I came to moments of anger that I understood were shameful, and I repented. I practiced wellness in tandem of praying for God to heal these things on me, and then one day it was gone. I have a love for natural health and wellness that has been reinforced to me in my relationship with the Lord, and I became a certified health coach 4 years ago. Something that grieves me. It's breaking my heart so much that I can feel it in my bones. I can feel it in my chest. I can feel the heartache so severely that I have been asking God to please take it away. But instead, I am coming to places of understanding. Through my years working as a health coach, I have worked with people who are Christian and people who are not. And what has baffled me is this. I have witnessed atheists have far more discipline and willpower and ownership of their own thoughts and actions than Christians. I have witnessed Buddhists be more open-minded to the soul transformation that Christ requires than Christians. I have witnessed agnostics who aren't against Christ or for Christ, they're just not sure yet, have a fire of servitude in helping others and generate action far more than Christians. I have seen such service and compassion and empathy and healing and generosity and humility among so many people, more so than Christians. And my heart is grappling with this because do we not have the Holy Spirit? Do we not have that fire inside of us that tells us that we are loved and we are worthy? So stand up, be not afraid, but be courageous. Go forth in the name of the Lord. Does he not tell us that he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world? So why then do we slap people across the face with their shortcomings? I have seen such deep compassion and empathy and understanding from people who are not Christians. And I have seen God work miracles in places that Christians would say he wouldn't turn his gaze toward. Romans chapter 10, verse 20. But Isaiah is very bold and says, I was found of them that sought me not. I was made manifest unto them that asked not after me. But to Israel he says, all day long I have stretched forth my hands unto a disobedient and gainsaying people. A tipping point for me recently with these thoughts is that I was scrolling on Instagram and I found this video of a girl who looked like she stepped out of the 1970s. Full hippie, long blonde hair, big headband, and a peace sign behind her on the wall. And she was singing praise to Yahweh. And if you don't know the name Yahweh, that is the name that God gives himself to Moses. I am that I am, Yahweh. I opened the comment section of this video and I found very little praise, rejoicing, very little positivity, and instead I found intense criticism, condemnation, and correction because she had a peace symbol behind her. Right after that video was another video of a woman talking about the beauty of herbalism and talking about how herbs are of God's creation and how it is a contradictory thing to trust man-made medicine but to not trust the leaves of the trees, to not trust the herb of the field which God has given us. And the entire comment section was filled with condemnation, criticism, and correction. So here is the list of scriptures that have come to my mind and my heart today. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but you do not consider the plank in your own? Matthew 7:3. Whoever is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of judgment. Matthew 5:22. Work out your own salvation with trembling. Philippians 2:12-13. All have sinned and all fall short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23. Wellness is such a crucial thing for Christians to finally embrace and get into because our emotions cause us to act sinfully. Being cruel and unkind to a stranger on the internet because you've seen 6 seconds of a video about them doing something that you're not familiar with, but they're praising the name of the Lord. It's very strange and very intense to quickly come in and condemn, criticize, and correct, to see the speck in their eye, but not address the log in your own when you do not know this person. Something extremely striking about Jesus Christ in the book of Matthew, Sermon on the Mount, is Christ takes everything the law says and brings it to the spirit of the law. And that's actually a law enforcement term I learned from my father, who is a retired cop, which is that there is the written law and the spirit of the law. So Jesus says, you have heard that if you murder, you'll face the courts, you'll face judgment, you're guilty. But Jesus says, if you are angry with your brother without cause, you are in danger of judgment. What is anger? It is an emotion. Anger is an emotion. The emotion behind the sin makes us guilty of sin. So in natural health and wellness, it is understood that there are a plethora of emotions that cause illness and ultimately lead to an illness that can take you to death sooner. And the emotions on that list that I can think of in this moment are resentment, bitterness, hatred, envy, and unforgiveness. Pride, I would add that one too. All of these emotions in natural health and wellness open the door for illness. What does God say about sin? It leads to death. Where does illness lead? To death, ultimately, to a sooner death. What does Christ say is sin? The emotions of the sin. In the Lord's Prayer, it says, Lord, forgive me as I forgive others. And lead me not into temptation. It says here in John that if you hate your brother, you're guilty of murder. Emotional accountability is lacking within the Christian community. I'm talking about believers having bitterness reigning in their hearts, anger fueling their words, an inability to control their tongues, their fingertips. I'm talking about this complete lack of awareness of emotional impulse and influence, which in the natural health and wellness world is known to be the cause of sickness. Wellness, by definition, is the practice of maintaining health. Wellness is also the daily accountability and ownership of one's thoughts and emotions. Scripture tells us to take our thoughts captive, but if we have not the slightest idea of how to be still and understand how to observe what we are thinking, to actually feel what we are feeling, how do we ever take it captive and put it on the table before the Lord and say, here, this is for you? Wellness, in so many ways, is practical application of transformation. It is the process of being in the present moment and doing an action that engages with the process of character transformation. How can we call ourselves a holy, ordained, anointed people when we don't even equip God's authority to heal, to be grounded? Aren't we established on the rock? I just don't understand these things. Christians have access to such incredible authority and power, and then they throw that in people's faces, and yet they can't present the Lord, they can't represent the Lord in online spaces without sounding hateful. What message are we giving the world about who Christ is if we proclaim his kingdom come with bitterness and hatred and rage? These things grieve me, and now I am at a point where I have felt moved to share this grief. So do what you will with the information in this video if you have made it thus far. My name is Kayleigh, and I'm building a channel about mental health, healing from trauma, and wellness in the name of the Lord on YouTube. And if you find interest in that, stick around, check it out, see what you like. I appreciate your time, and I hope that we can reflect on these things and be bolder in our prayers about our emotions and healing. God bless. See you next time. Bye.